Welcome to What's My Learning Style. My name's Peter and I'm from the Learning and Development Studio. Now, learning styles are actually quite an interesting thing, and there's lots of different theories about learning styles, and you can look those up. A good place to start is actually with with Wikipedia. Now, when covering our learning styles today, I'm actually going to look at the two most common ones which are actually used within the corporate world within Australia and the United Kingdom. So what we're actually going to look at is we're going to look at the different approaches to learning styles. So the two most common ones that are used in Australia and the United Kingdom. We're going to look at the different types of learning styles that are used within these models, and then I'm going to give you the opportunity to assess your own learning style. Now, the thing about learning styles is that they are different for each and every single one of us. Now, these are actually things that they're finding that in fact they are preferences, but they have a lot to do with the way that our brain is actually wired. Now, it's not that we don't, when we look at the different learning styles, that we use one. It's in fact that we actually, when there are three or four, in fact we use all four of them, but we actually preference one above the other, and these can actually change depending on the context in which we're in. But as a general rule, we do tend to actually prefer one above the other. So the first one that I'm going to talk about today is the Honey and Mumford model. And Honey and Mumford are actually the most preferred model in a recent survey by the English local authorities in the way that they actually assess people in terms of learning styles. Now, Honey and Mumford actually broke it down into four types. They said that you had a reflector, a pragmatist, a theorist, and an activist. Basically speaking, a reflector is the person who sits in a meeting, may take notes, they'll go away to consider what's been said, and they'll come back later and ask the meeting convener or the manager with their questions at a later date. The pragmatist is actually focused on how this information is then applied to the real world. So it's actually, okay, well, what does this mean? Okay, well, how will that be applied? The theorist, on the other hand, is actually focused on the theory. So that's the what and the why. So why have they done this? What's brought this about? What are they expecting to get as the outcomes? Whereas the activist is the person who actually asks lots of questions, and sometimes the questions are almost just restating the information they've just received, but this is actually their way of solidifying the information that they've taken away. The second model, the VARK model, which is actually invented by a man of the name of Fleming, he is actually the most common one that's actually used within Australia, and so it's actually the visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic learning, or sometimes just the visual, auditory, kinesthetic learning models. These are sometimes referred to as I'm losing my train of thought. These are actually referred to as the sensory learning model. Now, visual learners, of course, have a preference for seeing things, so pictures, visual aids, demonstrations, things like that. Auditory learners, on the other hand, actually learn best through listening, so lectures, discussions, tapes. It skips the reading and writing, but that's quite obvious. They actually prefer the textbooks, the reading, the writing. Whereas the kinesthetic learners, also called the tactile learners, they prefer to learn via experience. That's the moving, the touching, the doing. And a lot of adults actually do that. And again, as I've said to you, we do use all four of these, and they will change depending upon the context. So they will actually change depending upon our engagement and our interest with the topic. So, now that we've actually introduced you very quickly to what these learning styles are about, I'd actually like you to have a look at which one of the Honey and Mumford learning styles are you. So you're at a meeting at work, and they're discussing a new pay structure. Now, do you A, listen intently, go away and think about what has been said, and you'll come back at a later date and ask questions? B, restate and ask questions about what's being said to you to confirm your understanding? C, want to know what and why this is actually happening? Or D, just want to know how this impacts you? Now, chances are, if you've answered A, then your primary preferred learning style is that of a reflector, which means you learn best by listening and then going away to consider what has been said. If you've answered B, chances are you're an activist and that's your preferred learning style, and you learn best by asking questions and restating information to solidify your understanding. If you've answered C, your preferred learning style is probably that of a pragmatist, which means you learn best by focusing on how this new information is applied to your world. And D, if you've answered D, then your preferred learning style is probably that of a theorist, and you learn best by focusing on the what and the why. In other words, the theory behind it. It's important to be mindful of these things because it actually means that you can then actually adapt your behaviour in order to actually better take in information when sitting in training sessions and in meetings. Now let's have a look at our VARK model. So I want you to imagine that you've received a new phone and it resembles no other phone you've ever seen before, and you're there in the shop and they hand you the box. Do you A, pull it out of the box and start playing with it, B, read the manual, C, have one of the shop staff explain to you how to use it, or D, have the shop staff demonstrate it to you? Now, chances are, if you've answered A, then your preferred learning style is probably that of a kinesthetic learner, which means you actually learn best by doing. So that's engaging with the content, moving, touching, feeling. If you've answered B, chances are that you're actually a reading, writing learner, which means that you actually learn best by reading and writing. So therefore, it's the far more academic approach. If you've answered C, then your preferred learning style is probably that of an auditory learner, and you learn best by listening, which means that although things are coming up, you actually do prefer to have things said. If you've answered D, chances are that you're a visual learner and you learn best by seeing, so that's the charts and the diagrams. Now, there is no right or wrong way to actually learn. Again, these are just a nice little way to know in order to better prepare you for the way in which you can engage with content in meetings and in training sessions. My name's Peter, and I'd like to thank you for listening today.